Let's start with the next use case. This one is bundled orders and fulfillment. In a sense, the first three use cases are interlinked. I'd first started off with data capture at the last mile. I'd shown you a few different ways in which transactions can be performed at the last mile. I then logged in as the vendor of that particular facility that I used in the earlier use case. And I'd shown you how the vendor can place orders on behalf of these last mile facilities. This is essentially the vendor managed inventory or the informed push model. Now I'll be showing you bundled orders and fulfillment. This will show you how the consignment can be tracked as it moves from the vendor to the customer. I'll again be switching between screens. So what you can see here, this is the Logistimo fleet application. This is used by drivers of delivery vehicles as they are moving consignments from one location to the other. So on his screen, when he's out on the field, a notification would pop up on his screen, and it will tell him what he needs to do. So essentially, what it's showing him here is that he has two tasks to be performed. He has to do a pickup task from the Dharwad Medical Center and drop it off at the Hubli PHC. Now, this is the same order which I had generated in the previous use case. So what I'll do now is, so on the screen, the first thing that he has to do is do a pickup. So we have Google Maps integrated with our Logistimo fleet application. So what he can do is he'll click on this icon, and Google Maps opens up, and he can find the directions to that particular facility, and he can navigate there, right? So once he reaches that particular facility, what he would do is he'd say pickup order, right? So all the different details of the order is listed here. Once he arrives, he'll say pickup order. We've enabled pricing here, so the price gets calculated based on the dimensions of the consignment as well as the distance that it needs to travel. But the price information can be disabled if the fleet is owned by the healthcare system itself, and if price information is not required, that can be disabled. I'll say next. So the next step is the order manifest gets printed on the system. So it's on the application. It can be printed on a printer, and it can be stuck onto the consignment. If this is a requirement in the location where we are operating, we can do that. So we have a physical consignment form as well. So the next step is to, so what I'll do is, so this is the consignment, and it has an RFID tag on it. So what I'll do is I'll take the application and I'll just tap the RFID tag. And what should happen now is that this RFID tag gets tagged onto this particular order. So I've tagged this package to this particular order. I'll say next. So it's asking me to click a picture of the item. So the camera opens up on my application, and I'll click a picture at the time that I pick it up, and I'll say next. So next step is for me to take a signature from the person who is shipping this order. I have the signature. So now I can see a checklist on my screen of all the things that I was supposed to do. I was supposed to weigh the item. I was supposed to find out the price. I have the manifest, I scanned the RFID, I took a picture of the item, and I took a signature. So it looks like I've done everything that I was supposed to do. I'll say next. Now the pickup task is essentially complete. So the next thing that needs to be done is to drop off this order. So automatically the next task pops up on my screen. So it's not always required that you pick up and deliver the same order. If there's another task which is generated in between, then that sequencing is taken care of by the system itself. So similarly, I'll navigate to this particular drop-off location. I'll say drop order. This is the order details. I'll say drop order again. I'll again scan the RFID code to make sure that I'm dropping off the right item. So it looks like it's the right item. I'll say next. I'll take another picture of the item as proof that there is no damage during the transportation. I'll now take another signature from the person who is receiving this item. I'll say next. I'll see another checklist now. Looks like everything is done. I'll collect cash from the person who is receiving this item because it's enabled that way. We can override the cash component if it's not required. I'll say next, and now the delivery is complete. So this is essentially a use case, a demo flow of how we can track the consignment as it goes from the vendor to the receiving facility. Now, Logistimo Fleet also works as a standalone platform. So it enables demand aggregation. Customers, anybody who wants to move a commodity from location A to location B, they can sign up on the Logistimo Fleet customer app, and they can place a request to move a consignment from location A to location B. Now, at the back end, what the system will do is it will aggregate all the similar tasks together, consignments that are moving in similar locations. It'll aggregate them together, and it will surface them up to transporters who have signed up to work with Logistimo Fleet, right? So in a sense, it crowdsources the transportation, and these transporters are expected to bid on the different packages of different routes that have been put out there, and the drivers or the transporters who bid the least essentially win that particular bid, and they're assigned those set of pickups and deliveries. And on the system, of course, the system takes care of the scheduling, the routes, and everything. And in real time, these drivers can be monitored on the system. And I'd already demonstrated how the consignments can be tracked from the time that they picked up till the time that they dropped off, and the vehicles also can be tracked in real time on the Logistimo Fleet system. So, Logistimo Fleet has been deployed in Mozambique for lab sample transportation as a standalone platform. We've also deployed it in northern Karnataka region in about 2,500 villages, where Logistimo Fleet is used for small parcel deliveries of items in rural areas. So the great part about Logistimo Fleet is it aggregates demand and it optimizes the route. Rather than having, so in rural areas, what we see is people have to pay a bi-directional full truckload price, irrespective of how large or small the consignment is, or how far or nearby the delivery and the pickup and the delivery points are. But with the Logistimo Fleet, you essentially only pay for what you use. So it reduces costs tremendously and increases efficiency. The next use case that I'll be demonstrating is inventory optimization of flow casting. Now, this is a case study from one of the countries where Logistimo was deployed, and I'd like to showcase the inventory optimization feature of the product using this particular case study. So I'll start off with quickly talking about how the stock thresholds for most medical commodities are set in public health supply chains of emerging markets. So let's take vaccines as an example, but a similar process is used for most healthcare commodities. First off, there's an annual infant target which every health facility is supposed to cater to. This is the infant target within the catchment area of a particular health facility, and typically this comes from the census data. So then what happens is a dosage per infant, a fixed multiply is multiplied to the annual infant target. Now this varies based on every vaccine, but essentially the policy mandates that a number of doses is given to each infant. So this multiplier is multiplied to the annual infant target to get a bigger number. So then what happens is a fixed wastage factor is again multiplied to the previous number that we've arrived at. This wastage factor is required because once a vaccine vial is opened, not all the vaccines can be consumed. Not all the vaccines can be administered to children who come. So because there's a time limit within which the vaccine has to be consumed. If it's not consumed within this time, it needs to be thrown away. So because some amount of vaccines are thrown away, there's a fixed wastage factor which is considered. This factor varies by vaccine. So this number is taken and it's multiplied to the previous number that we have. On top of that, there's some amount of buffer stock which is added. Again, there's a fixed multiplier for buffer stock. This is essentially to protect against variability in consumption so that there are no stockouts. On top of that, there is a lead time stock buffer which is again added. This is to ensure the stock is available between the times that an order is placed and the time that order actually arrives. Now this is the annual number that they have, and they just they divide this number by 12 and they get the monthly number, and it's assumed that consumption looks like this, that it's a straight line. But in reality, what we see is that there are several inefficiencies in this way of doing things. Firstly, the census data is outdated. We see the census happens at best, let's say, once in 10 years. And so this base number itself is not accurate. On top of that, there is migration. There is inward and outward migration. People are constantly moving. So it's not required that an infant that is born in a particular area will always go to that particular health center for the immunization. Secondly, we know that the dosage per infant also goes on changing. There is sometimes there's the concept of fractional doses, which is introduced by governments in sometimes when there's a supply shortage or for some other reasons. So based on how the policy varies, the number of doses administered per infant also goes on varying. And we also know that the wastage factor is not fixed. A wastage factor is varies based on the footfall. Let's say in a densely populated area, the wastage factor would not be that high. But in a sparsely populated area, when footfall is very sparse, we see that more and more vaccines are wasted. Hence, the wastage factor can't be assumed to be a fixed number. It again varies based on the footfall. Coming to buffer stock, we know that buffer stock is a function of variability in demand. So if there's high variability, then you need high buffer stock. If there's low variability, you don't need as much. And lead time stock again is a function of proximity between the vendor and the customer stores. It also depends on the conditions of the roads between those two particular stores. But what we see is that we just have a fixed multiplier irrespective of how close or far these two facilities are. And coming to consumption patterns over months, we know that consumption is not a straight line. There are cyclic patterns, there are seasonal patterns, there are upward trajectories, there are downward trajectories. Essentially, what I want to say is that a one size fits all approach just doesn't work. It's extremely inefficient, and it leads to an inflated amount of inventory in the pipeline. So what we hypothesized is that if we were to leverage the data that is gathered on the Logistimo system, the consumption data that is gathered, similar to the consumption transaction that I performed in an earlier use case. What we hypothesized is that if we were to use this consumption data at the last mile and predict consumption at the last mile using different forecasting methods, then we would know the real consumption at the last mile. Once we know the real consumption, we could simply calculate the inventory thresholds at all the other echelons by using the lead time data that is also captured by the system. So in a sense, the actual consumption, the true consumption, only happens at the last mile. The inventory positions at all the other echelons can be calculated rather than forecasted using the lead time data that we have. Now, the system supports different forecasting techniques to predict consumption at the last mile. We support the basic moving averages models and the ARIMA, ARIMAX models, but we also support advanced regression models. And if you want other kind of models, we can always do the forecasts outside of the system and then upload these forecasts on the system. We also support different inventory policies. We support periodic review policies, continuous review policies, as well as hybrid policies. In this particular country, when we launched a pilot project, we went with the basic moving average method because that was the easiest, that was the most explainable forecasting technique. And we went with a hybrid policy where we had a monthly cycle of periodic review, but with also an opportunity, an opening for last mile facilities to place emergency orders or pull orders as and when a need would arise. So we launched a pilot, and that pilot was highly successful, and we are now at the stage of rolling this out across the whole country. So what we see is that more than $70 million is being saved annually for the national immunization program of the country in which we are deployed. That is an inventory reduction of about 17.3%, and this comes at a minimal availability reduction. So the stockouts went up very, very slightly. So just a marginal increase in stockouts that results in inventory reduction of about 17.3%, which is upwards of $70 million. Now, this was a country where the availability was already at a very, very high number. So what happened here is when we introduced scientific inventory thresholds, what happened is the working capital went down. The amount of vaccines that we needed to store went down drastically from about $517 million to about $428 million. In another scenario where availability would have been low, we would have seen the opposite. The cost might have gone up, but it would have resulted in huge increases in stock availability and reduced stockouts. And this is an example of how data that is gathered by our system can be leveraged to enable tremendous cost savings for national healthcare systems. This was the initial phase of the project where we are saving about $70 million. But subsequently, when we introduced all the particular vaccines in this national healthcare supply chain, we estimate that we'll save about $200 million annually for the national immunization program in this country that we're deployed on an annual basis. That's the reduction in working capital. The next use case that I'll be demonstrating is big data analytics. I'll be showing you how some examples of how the data that we managed to gather on our system, how that data can be used to inform decision making. So we have a robust big data analytics platform where we have several reports and dashboards. We report data on about 100 plus metrics in about 25 to 30 odd reports. And this data can be viewed across time, can be viewed across facilities, across materials. We have visualizations such as map-based visualizations, bar charts, pie charts, area charts, etc. We also have something that we call the bulletin board. So the bulletin board is essentially like a cockpit-like visualization. It's like a control center. So this bulletin board is viewed on a television screen, and this television screen we try to install it in a public location. So the purpose of this is to nudge decision makers to act, so that we try to exert some amount of social pressure on the decision makers to act on anomalous events in the supply chain. So data is given to is made visible to decision makers on the bulletin board, and also via SMS notification. So the reason I'm highlighting these two cases is that we make an effort to push data to users even without asking them to explicitly log in to the system and come to the data. So we try to take the data to the users rather than wait for the users to come to the data. So I'll be doing a demo of the dashboards and reports first, and then we'll quickly look at the bulletin board as well. So here we have on the screen, I can see a couple of donut charts, one on the left and one on the right. We'll just stick to the one on the left for now. We'll cover the one on the right later on. So here, so what this donut chart is telling me is that 60% of all my commodities are optimally stocked. It's between the minimum and maximum threshold, so there's no concern here. But it's also telling me that 14% of my inventory items are overstocked. Right, so 14% are overstocked. That's about 46,000 items are overstocked. 11% of commodities are understocked. It's below the minimum advised stock threshold. And it's also telling me 13% of my inventory items have stocked out. There is zero stock. So you would have noticed that the map visualization below also changes based on what I select on top. So if I select the minimum events, the map will populate in yellow. But if I select the stock out events, the map shows me the stock outs. So if I look at the different shades of red here, it looks like this particular state is where is the most alarming, because 26.3% of inventory items are stocked out. That's why it's in the darkest shade of red. On the right, I can also see by commodity where most of the stockouts are coming from. It looks like the measles vaccine is the biggest contributor to the stockouts, and the Nagaland state is the biggest contributor to stockouts in terms of geography. Now that I've identified the problem at a macro level, what I can do is drill down from the macro level to a micro level and identify the root cause of this particular problem. So I'll click on this state. And what should happen now is it should go one level deeper, and I'll see a map of the different districts in the state, and it's telling me where the stockouts are located, where the majority of the stockouts are located. It looks like this particular district is where 37.6% of inventory items have stocked out. So this is the most concerning. So I'll drill down one step deeper. And here I can see the different facilities in this particular district. It looks like these are the three most alarming facilities, because 50% of the items there have stocked out. So I can go one level deeper, and I can go right down to go right down to the facility level, and I can see the different items and when they have stocked out. So it looks like the hepatitis B vaccine has stocked out 4 days ago, and this is the minimum and this is the maximum threshold. So I'll go back now. So what I'd done is I'd drill down based on stockouts, and I'd gone right from the national level. I'd identified problem areas and I'd drilled down right till that particular facility. But I can do the same thing based on different other methods of drilling down. I can drill down by, let's say, user activity. So here this chart is telling me that 9.57% of the stores of the facilities are inactive. So the users are not using the system here. So I can identify where those that poor user activity is coming from, and I can use the same process to drill down. So this was the dashboard module. I can also quickly show you the reports module. So we have 25 odd reports where over time, across facilities, across materials, data can be visualized. So let's look at the consumption report as an example of the report. So let's look at the consumption report. So here what I'm saying is I look at just the district level facilities, and I'll pick a few materials for which I would like to view this report. So I'll pick about 4 materials at a district level and I'll view this report. So this report is essentially showing me the consumption trends over time, how it's the pattern that it's showing. So it looks like this is the measles vaccine, which is in green, which is the consumption is next to nothing. That's because the measles vaccine has been replaced by the measles rubella vaccine. So when new vaccines are introduced and we want to monitor the switch in real time, this report can be used to see if there is uptake of one vaccine and there's reduction in consumption of the other vaccine. You can also see that there's a strong correlation between the consumption of BCG vaccine as well as the measles rubella vaccine. That's why the peaks and the falls kind of coincide with time. This report can easily be used to in a private scenario if we want to look at how competitive products are doing. This same report can be used there as well. And this is the monthly view. I can look at, let's say, a daily view as well to go if I want to change the granularity to a day level. So most of the reports work the same way. I won't elaborate on the other reports, but the flow is essentially the same. Any kind of data with respect to inventory can be viewed here. With respect to the ordering process can be viewed here. Anything with respect to your assets can be viewed here. We also have activity related reports to see if people are using the system the way it's supposed to be used. Another thing that I'd like to show is something that we call the bulletin board. So this bulletin board, as I had mentioned earlier, it's installed on a television screen. And in real time, so this is it's like a stock ticker. Every 10 or 20 seconds, the visualization will change, and it'll show us something about the supply chain that we would like to know. So this is showing us the stock out. So this is telling us 16% of items are stocked out. This is the top 10 states in terms of stock outs. This is the top 10 materials in terms of stock outs. This is number of inventory items, and this is essentially a map visualization which is telling me where most of the stockouts are occurring. So it's changed again. It's showing me now by minimum and maximum stock thresholds where most of the overstocking is happening, where most of the understocking is happening. The next use case that I wanted to cover is IoT integration. As an example of how we integrate with IoT devices, I'll take the example of remote temperature monitoring loggers. So this is what an RTM device looks like. This is the sensor. This sensor goes into the refrigerator, and data is captured by the sensor, and the data with respect to temperature is captured by the sensor, and you can see the temperature position here. This device also has a SIM card. So because of the SIM card, whatever data is captured by this logger can be transmitted to our system. And since we've integrated with this, the temperature positions in real time flows into our system. That's what this use case is about. So right now our system is already integrated with these different RTM providers, Nimble Wireless, Berlinger, and Nextleaf, and the integration with Parcel is coming soon. But we can very easily integrate with other RTM manufacturers and also with other IoT providers who bring a data of a completely different kind to the table. Now, The temperature data is important in, let's say, a vaccine scenario, because vaccines have to be maintained between 2 and 8 degrees centigrade for their efficacy to remain. Now, because we integrate with these RTM providers on our platform, we can not only see data with respect to quantity of vaccine, but we can also see data with respect to the quality of vaccine. So with quantity, we know that there are no stock cuts. With quality, we know that there are no temperature excursions which are compromising the efficacy of this vaccine. So, in the earlier use case, we'd seen these donut charts. The donut chart on the left is telling us about the inventory position, but the one on the right is telling us about temperature position. So, everywhere where we have the greens, the 91% of the temperature loggers of the refrigerators are in the right temperature position between 2 and 8 degrees centigrade. But the reds are telling me where there are excursion events where the temperature is higher than 8 degrees centigrade, and the blues are telling me where the temperature is below 2 degrees centigrade. So I can troubleshoot similar to how I troubleshooted the inventory positions. I can also troubleshoot the temperature positions. And if I want to look at one particular refrigerator in specific, so this is what it looks like. So this is over time. This is today's graph, and over time, I know at every 10-minute intervals, I know what the temperature positions were. So for this particular ILR, this particular refrigerator which is installed here, I know the temperature positions, and I have a historic a log of all the alarms as well. So I know that 12 days ago there was a temperature incursion where when the temperature breached or came back to between 2 and 8 degrees centigrade. And the system would have in real time sent an SMS to the owner of this particular refrigerator and asked him to go to the location and see what the problem is. So the last use case that I'll be covering is workforce empowerment, and I'll be showing you how Logistimo's Pulse application can be used to empower the workforce as well as monitor the workforce in real time on a mobile application. During the course of our projects, what we saw was that most supervisors are on the go. They're always on the field. They're busy doing multiple things, and they don't always have access to a laptop computer. They're not always sitting in an office with access to these computers. That's when we realized that there is a need for a mobile supervisory application. What we also realized is that not everyone is comfortable consuming analytics as charts or graphs. Some people are more comfortable consuming analytics in a textual format. What we also, the third thing that we felt was that it's not enough to only highlight critical events in the supply chain. It's also important to recognize the performance of good performing pharmacists in the supply chain, those who are managing their supply chains well. There's a need to surface these users up so that supervisors can recognize their performance, and these users, these supply chain personnel will be motivated to carry forward their good work. So because of that, we developed the Logistimo Pulse application. I'll do a quick demo of the Pulse application to you here. So this is the Logistimo Pulse application that I'm projecting on my screen. So we have the inventory donut here and a temperature donut here, and the activity bar here. It offers drill down functionality very similar to what we saw on the web. So I won't cover this here, but essentially similar to the web application, you can identify problem areas at a macro level and then drill down to micro level issues to root causes. Below that, what you can see here is something that we call good performance indicators. So there are different parameters based on good performance, based on which good performance can be set, and this is completely configurable. We can configure these thresholds based on whatever is required. So here there is good performance in terms of stock availability. So if I click on this exclamatory icon, it tells me the definition for good stock performance. If I just go back. If I scroll this to the left, I'll see good asset management. This is essentially good monitoring, good maintenance of cold chain equipment. If I keep scrolling, I have good supply performance, I have on-time data entry, and it'll go on and on. There are different parameters based on which we can set these good performance indicators. So the objective of these good performance indicators, these different cards, is to highlight the users who are performing well. Now, if I want to see who are these users who are performing timely data entry, I will click on this card. It will go one level deeper, and it will give me the different states, and it will tell me the name of the person in charge of the state, and it will tell me his phone details as well as his SMS details. I can just click on this SMS icon and I can send him a message. I can keep drilling down one level deeper, and I now know the different districts, and I know the good performing users here. So what you can see below that is a like icon. This is very similar to the Facebook like. So if I were to click on this, I won't do it because it's I don't want to disturb the actual live data. But if I click on this like icon will essentially highlight. It'll appear in a dark blue shade, and an SMS notification is sent out to this particular user, congratulating him for his good performance. And the system essentially says that this person's supervisor has recognized his good performance, and he's asked him to continue performing well. So that's one way in which the system helps recognize the workforce for their good performance. Below that, I can also see critical events. So along with good performance, we also highlight critical events on a need to know basis. They are surfaced up to the supervisors. So here is telling me that there are 30,000 odd stockouts across the country. I'll click on that particular card. I see by different states, I see different stockouts. It looks like there are 6,500 odd stockouts in this particular state. I'll click it again, and I should now see a list of different districts and where those stockouts are. I can keep drilling down here again, similar to the earlier dashboard that we'd seen. I can keep drilling down, and it will keep going one level further. It should now show me. It's now showing me the different facilities here. Screen is a little blurry, but it's showing me the different facilities here. It's showing me the name of the person in charge of this facility. There's the phone icon. I can click on this phone icon, and the phone number of that person appears here. I just need to hit the green button on my dial pad here, and I can call up this person, and I can figure out what the problem is. So that was the Logistimo Pulse application. We've seen very high user adoption for this application. So these supervisors, there's no mandate for them to be on the system because they are not performing data entry themselves. But this is like an additional application that we've introduced in some of our projects, and we've seen that 97% of the users return and use the application on an ongoing basis because it helps them monitor the supply chain on the go. This is the need of the hour for many supervisors that we work with. Today, Logistimo is deployed in several countries across Asia and Africa. Over 25,000 facilities use our system, and our systems directly or indirectly impact the lives of 800 million individuals. Our systems also see extremely high reporting rates. Over 97% of users who are on the platform actively use the system each month. And that has enabled stock availability of greater than 98%. And we've also been able to bring in enormous cost savings for the programs in which we reach, sometimes to the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars. Today, Logistimo is deployed in several countries. In India, we're deployed as even in about 20,000 odd facilities. In Indonesia, Logistimo is deployed as Smile in a couple of districts. We're also working in Somaliland, Uganda, DRC, and Zambia. We're expecting to start a project very soon in Angola, and we're also in discussions for deployments in Mexico, Senegal, Sudan, Afghanistan, and Uzbekistan. And in the past, we were deployed in South Sudan, Mozambique, as well as Myanmar. That's the end of the demo. I tried to showcase the most important functionalities of the product, but it wasn't an exhaustive demo in any sense. But if you have any specific questions or would like to see any specific feature of the particular of the technology, please feel free to reach out to us. You can write to us at info@logistimo.com. That's info@logistimo.com. Thank you.